flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Can I get a motion to approve our minutes from the October 23rd meeting?
Move it.
Second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
So the motion carried 5-0.
Yes. Oh, we didn't do a roll call either.
That's okay. Go ahead now.
Do it now.
Chairman June Perrin, Vice Chair David Leland,
Here.
Commissioner Ross Shillingford,
Here.
Commissioner Charles Plummer,
Here.
Commissioner Ray Nazareth,
Here.
Phyllis Marquise,
Here.
and Adam Miller.
And I can go ahead and swear everyone in now at the beginning? Okay, so all of the hearings on the planning and zoning agenda tonight are what we call quasi-judicial. That means all testimony has to be under oath. So if you're here to speak on an application, if you could raise your right hand for me and I'll swear you in. Okay? Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Yes. All right, thank you. And Vice Chair, you can call the first item.
Okay, first item tonight is application number 18-0071, PVAR. Applicant Trinity Asphalt Paving is requesting parking variance from section 23-51.2.1 to reduce the number of required parking spaces from 31 to 30 for a property located at 11476 Okeechobee Boulevard.
Quasi-judicial, so I'll ask if any commissioners have any ex parte disclosures that they need to make.
None.
All right, thank you.
Great. Thank you, Vice Chair. I'm filling in for Kevin tonight. He's on vacation. He's took a little bit of time off. So without being redundant, as you stated, they are asking for 30 parking spaces where 31 is required. Village Code Section 2353A1 allows this board to grant variances to the parking code when special conditions and circumstances exist which are not applicable to other lands. Special conditions do not result from the actions of the applicant, will not confer on the applicant's special privileges that are denied to other lands. Literal interpretation of the code would deprive the applicant rights enjoyed by other lands. Minimum variance that will make possible the reasonable use of the property. And the variance will be in harmony with the general intent purpose of the zoning code and will not be injurious to the public welfare. Village staff supports the applicant's request to reduce the number of parking spaces provided from 31 to 30 in order to provide the required number of handicap parking spaces. The applicant is trying to retrofit their site to meet new ADA regulations, and as a result, they've fallen below their code requirement by one parking stall. And there are no other places on this site in order to provide that parking space. So they're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place with this one. And staff is recommending approval of this application. I'll turn the floor back over to you. Thank you.
Is there anyone here on behalf of them? Was this an ADA suit of some sort?
If you, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. If you could come to the microphone actually over at that podium and just state your name for the record, please. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Bethany Stanley with Trinity Asphalt, and they did have an ADA issue. They only had one space when they're required to have two. So I don't think there's any active suits, but I know they had some code enforcement issues.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Shillingford, any questions?
No. No.
Plummer?
No. No.
Ray?
I just wanted to comment that I appreciate you complying with the law and the ADA because that means a lot to me and the people that are disabled.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And Vice Chair, if we could open it for public comment, just in the event somebody did want to.
Yes,
make one.
this is an open forum. Is there anyone in the public that would like to say anything before we take it to a vote?
Thank you.
With that said, can I get a motion to approve application 18-0071 PVAR?
Move it.
Second?
I'll second it.
All those in approval?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
Okay, that motion passed 5-0. And Lauren, were you able to get who said? Okay, that was Commissioner Plummer made the motion, and Commissioner Marquis made the second.
Next on the agenda is application number 18-0077. The applicant, Coral Sky, is requesting architectural approval for a new canopy sign situated within the Coral Sky Shopping Center located at 510-590 North State Road 7.
And this is also quasi judicial, so I'll ask if anyone has any ex parte disclosures that they need to make. All right, thank you.
Okay, that was a great intro. So I'll skip right on to the actual sign itself. The applicant is seeking architectural approval to modify the approved sign criteria for the Coral Sky Shopping Center in order to allow for signs to be approved of the shopping center. The hanging marquee signs, as you see here on this slide, it has the required 8-foot clear for pedestrian walkways. The applicant is proposing that the signs will have a white background with red lettering and 8064 into the blue decorative features above and below the lettering, and staff is recommending approval of this application. And I'll turn the floor back over to you. Thank you.
Discussion or questions?
Nothing from
Commissioner
me.
Adams? No? And do we have any public comments?
And the applicant is here as well if you had any questions for her.
Yeah.
No questions? Commissioners?
No questions or comments?
Then can I get a motion to approve the application number 18-0077?
I'll make the motion as read.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
And that was it was Commissioner Plummer was the second, and that motion passed 5-0.
5-0.
Thank you.
Okay, moving right along. Next on the agenda is application number 18-111. The applicant, Specialty Therapy LLC, is requesting special exception use approval for a state licensed massage therapist establishment situated within the Lakeview Business Center, located at 1402 Royal Palm Beach Boulevard, Building 700, Suite 107.
And this is quasi judicial. Does anyone have any ex parte disclosures that they need to make?
None.
All right, thank you.
Is there any comment from the public, or is there someone here from Specialty Therapy? Okay, do you have a presentation for us, or?
I could go through mine, and
You
it'll
wanna go through
probably
yours?
cover
Okay.
pretty much everything. As you stated, this application is for a state licensed massage therapist. I believe the applicant does have a license currently, and they will be in Building 700, Suite 107, within the Office Commercial Zoning District, shown here on this slide, outlined in red. In reviewing this petition, village staff considered conformity with the Village of Royal Palm Beach Code of Ordinances, Section 2632F4, special exception applications. Specifically, is it consistent with the standards of the village's comprehensive plan, comply with all development regulations of the village code? Does it have adverse environmental impacts? Does it have adverse vehicle or pedestrian traffic impacts? Does not have adverse impact upon public facilities? Does not have adverse impacts on adjacent properties? Is compatible with the character and living conditions of the existing neighborhood? Does not have an adverse impact on property values in adjacent areas? Is not deterrent to the improvement or development of adjacent property? And will not seriously reduce the quality or quantity of light or air available to adjacent properties. The Village Council has approved state licensed massage therapists at various locations within the village, and the conditions of approval that are being recommended for this massage therapist are similar to those for previous massage therapist approvals. The applicant is in agreement with the recommended conditions of approval. They're shown here on this slide, In reviewing the proposed special exception, village staff considered compatibility with adjacent land uses, consistency with the village's comprehensive plan, and conformance with the village's development standards for the commercial office zoning district. And staff has determined that the proposed special exception conforms to these village standards. With that being said, I'll turn the floor back over to you, Vice Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Schillingsworth, got any questions?
No questions or comments.
Commissioner Plummer?
No questions.
Nothing from me.
Wow, this was an easy one tonight.
And if we could open it to public comment, in the event there is any. Any public comment? Okay, I'll close public comment. And just for the record, too, for notice purposes on this one, I wanted to announce that this will be going to the Village Council on December 20th for their final consideration. So once council approves the special exception, the applicant is going to be able to apply for her business tax receipts at that point in time. Okay, thank you.
Okay, with that said, can I get a motion to approve application number 18-111?
Move it.
Second.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, carries 5-0.
Okay, and then just to announce, the next meeting is Monday, December 17th, 2018. And Vice Chair, you can go ahead and close the Planning and Zoning meeting and open the LPA meeting.
Absolutely. Okay, that will conclude our meeting, planning and zoning tonight. And now we will move on to our local planning agency meeting. I assume that's why Mr. Hill is here.
And Lauren, can you just reflect in the record that the attendance is the same as we stated at the Planning and Zoning? You can, yes, you can add the Community Development Director is here as well.
Okay, so first of all, well, we have the same roll call. I don't know whether we need to do it again, do we?
No, it's okay.
Approval of the minutes from the September 25th meeting. Can I get a motion?
Motion to approve meeting minutes.
Second.
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. Okay, so first and only item on the agenda is the ordinance 945. I won't repeat the entire thing because Bradford, I'm sure, is going to explain it to us as we go.
I'm going to give Jennifer the honors.
Okay.
No problem. So joining me tonight, Community Development Director Rob Hill is here, and Bradford is here as well to help answer any questions that you have. Some of you were here on the commission when we heard this ordinance back in July of 2017. Some were not. Tonight, just for a little recap of the history, this board heard the ordinance and staff took a lot of your recommendations into consideration, and we went back to the drafting board afterwards and really hashed out a lot of the issues that you all identified to make sure that we were bringing something forward that was accurate and consistent as best that we could. It went to the village council for a workshop in October of 2018, and then it went to council for first reading at their first meeting in November. After tonight's meeting, it is going to go back to Village Council for second reading on December 6th. So there was a good amount of time in between the first time you looked at this and now. That's why we felt we should bring it back to you all, make sure that you understand the revisions that have happened since the first time you saw it. So what I'm going to do tonight is go through the revisions, the new stuff. I'm not going to go through the hour-long presentation of everything again. And then, like I said, Mr. Hill and Bradford are both here to answer questions if anyone has any. Okay, so starting with the definitions section, we had added new definitions for hat racking and tree abuse, which are tree maintenance standards, tree trimming standards. After this board met and was talking about public outreach and how important you thought public education and outreach was, staff did take that back, and we thought long and hard about how can we make these sections a little more reasonable. One of the things that we have added into the code now is if somebody does hat rack a tree or abuse a tree, trim it the wrong way, they're not going to be in violation of the code if that tree trimming was done at the direction of a landscape architect or an arborist. Because there are times where an arborist may make a decision to trim a tree a certain way to restore the health of the tree. There are those circumstances. So we wanted to provide residents and property owners the opportunity to come forward and say, hey, hold on, I hired an arborist, I did it the right way. My arborist told me to do it like this, and we wanted to give that exception. We thought that would be reasonable. Another thing that we did is we clarified the definition of hedge. We added in a little language about how you identify a hedge. We have a lot of material, whether it be the ficus hedges or the clusia hedges. We have some people argue with us they're trees, some people argue with us they're shrubs.
Right.
We wanted to make it clear what we meant. If something was a hedge, it's going to be a continuous barrier, regardless of whether it's a tree or a shrub, how it's maintained. If it's that continuous dense barrier, we're going to treat it as a hedge. So that's what we did in the definition sections. Under the violation sections, we again clarified with the tree trimming standards. Say somebody improperly pruned a tree, they hat racked it. Before, they would come in front of the code enforcement magistrate, and we would have a discussion about whether there was a violation or not, and then the magistrate would have a series of remedies that he could impose. One thing that we wanted to provide property owners with was the opportunity to have an arborist or landscape architect come and speak on their behalf and say, look, this tree, it was pruned improperly, absolutely, but it can be rehabilitated. Because there are times where, professionals can rehabilitate trees, so we don't have to order removal. We put that into the code, again, to give property owners an opportunity to have a less drastic measure of us ordering them to take out the tree. Yes, go
Yeah,
ahead.
you keep saying we, do we have a arborist on staff
Yes,
representing the village?
Not yet. I'm going to get to that in just a
Oh,
moment.
okay,
This was-
because, go ahead.
That was one of the board's recommendations,
Yep,
this
right.
commission's recommendations.
I remember.
November 21st, we did an advertisement in the Palm Beach Post for an urban forester, which is someone that has an arborist certification as well. We're hoping to have someone online in January.
Okay.
Be a consultant for the village to help with the public education effort that this ordinance is going to require, and then also just on a consulting basis with us to help out and administer the new ordinance requirements. So we did take that recommendation, and we are running with that. So
This is not a full-time employee, it would be someone on call or?
that's correct. To start out, we're starting out with a consultant. We're going to see how much work this ordinance actually generates.
Yep.
If in the event it generates a ton of work, then it may turn into a permanent position. We just don't know yet, so we didn't want to hire someone and then maybe down the road not need them anymore. So we thought the consultant route was the safer route.
Which brings me to my next question. We have an arborist and they have one, and if there's a stalemate, then what happens?
The magistrate decides.
Okay.
So the magistrate is there to weigh evidence. You have opposing arborists, the
Right.
magistrate's the one, just like a judge would do,
Okay.
decide which one they're going to go with. But we wanted, again, to make sure that the violation section was fair, and we were giving residents and business owners an opportunity to put on a full case for themselves, and that means allow them to have an arborist on their side and come and talk to the magistrate and explain this tree can be rehabilitated or whatever they want to explain.
This is a request. What I don't want to see is like people singled out, because sometimes, and I've seen residents come and go, and sometimes they think they're being picked on or singled out. So this will be fair and impartial based on what our arborist decides, and then if there's a stalemate, then it goes to our,
Special magistrate.
the special magistrate, right?
Mr. Hill's here, he's in
Yeah,
charge
if you
of
can-
code enforcement, he may be able to address
Yeah,
how
because
they
we want to be
bring
perfectly
violations.
clear, because
Right.
this right here is something that we're just coming into. And this, I'm just trying to clarify as much as I can in my mind.
Well, just to, first of all, it's good to be here, Commissioners. I see some familiar faces and some new faces. And I'm Robert Hill, the Community Development Director. I handle the building and the permitting, the business tax regulation, and the code enforcement. So I'm here tonight just to kind of explain to you or even answer your questions about how we're going to implement something that we think is really going to help protect property values. We think it's important, and I know you have bought into this, the idea. You've heard the concept, and you've probably coming to the point where you're realizing this is a great idea. How the heck are we going to do it? Exactly. All right. First of all, let me address the idea about being singled out, because if there's one thing I'm sensitive about, and there's one thing I hear quite often, it's how I'm singled out, you know, I've got cans all down this neighborhood, and while it may seem like that, most of the time, we are taking action against other people with other situations. But absolutely, we're going to try to, we are going to implement this uniformly across the board. It's not going to be an aggressive kind of ordinance. We are not going to, you know, as soon as our 6-month period, I think you recall, there is a period of education that we're requesting from the council. So then after that December 2nd reading would start a 6-month period of education. We intend to make ourselves available to all the HOAs. You'll see us on the marquee. You'll see letters or articles that I'll be writing for the newsletter, explaining to everybody the intricacies of this code. Because as you know, and I sense that you see that this is a significant change, not just that protecting the canopy, but we're also now establishing a more uniform code, you know, to meet the fairness issue to everyone in the village. So, you know, the properties that through attrition, through hurricanes, or just poor management, or even choices of being able to remove the canopy in the village, we're going to be able to take action. It doesn't mean we're going to load up in our white trucks and drive around the neighborhood and start hammering everybody. Yeah. But we know that down the road, when somebody goes to improve a property, say on the south end of town where I live, if it's a significant crossing of some of those thresholds, like a larger driveway of 250 square feet or a shed or an addition, then we're going to require them to go ahead and give us a survey of the foliage or the canopy on their property. So they will be made to comply with this ordinance. And the other thing I really like about this ordinance I want to point out is that in discussion and in the workshops, we made it as fair as we could. In that situation, remember, we're going to reduce it down to just the net area. So we're going to be able to take out everybody's existing living area, sheds, pools, everything that's in there, and then the net area of landscaping that's left is how we're going to calculate the code on the ratio of trees to shrubs. The arborist idea is going to give us that opportunity, as Jennifer had pointed out, to be able to have somebody come and have that option, whereas, as you may have recalled in the past, it's very difficult when somebody tries to do something that they think is correct and only weakens the trees. And we've really been left to be only fair way out was to see and wait to see if they would survive, even though they have been compromised.
I have a question, if you don't mind.
Mr.
There was one incident where I remember that the homeowner was applying for a hardship because she didn't have any space. Like you said, you got the shed, you got the code enforcement and the compliance, and she was caught between the rock and the hard place. So is there going to be some kind of leniency? And you mentioned the net space, right? So can you elaborate on that? Because I'm not very clear on that.
Well, let me defer to Bradford for this.
If I may, our code, the way that it's set up within the multifamily and the commercial properties, they have this net lot idea where, like Rob touched upon, you have buildings, you have driveways, you have parking lots in these other areas. So it is now just going to be where the single family doesn't have that. It was taking the entire piece of property. Say I was dealing with a young lady today where she had 0.29 acres, which required 7 trees, right. 7 trees. And she was wanting to put in a pool. And she says, Mr. O'Brien, where do I put these pools? And I advised her, why don't you wait a couple of weeks because we're changing it to the net lot area. So we're lessing out. So put it in your minds, the 2.9 acres or 0.29 acres. So then you have the house. That house has a footprint of 3,200 square feet. So now that comes out of the 0.29 acres. You have a driveway that's 25 by 20. Now that comes out of, the acreage. Then you have the pool. Now that comes out. So she'll probably be left with somewhere along the lines of 3,600 square feet of net lot area, which then at that point in time will require 2 trees.
Okay.
So that's how things are going to work. Yes.
I have a question. So if someone comes in for a permit and they want to pave their entire lot,
you can't do that. We have an impervious area minimum requirement threshold that they have to maintain, and that's based on drainage.
Right.
Or for drainage, yes,
But
sir.
the thought process, and if any of you watched the council presentations on this,
did,
the thought is lessen the overall burden of the number of trees and shrubs you have to have on your property in the residential areas. But the ones that you are required to have, we're going to expect you to maintain them properly.
Okay.
And we're going to expect you to keep them intact. And when they die or they fall down in a hurricane, you're going to replace them. But we did want to lessen the overall burden. That's where this net lot area came into play.
That's where the education portion comes in.
Yes,
You
because
know,
again, it's a
we'll
very
work with
different
you, we'll
standard.
educate you.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, and there is, if I may jump in, there is one other level of fairness in that same example, somebody has a smaller lot and they want to build a pool for their quality of life, and they want to have, they're told they need to add 2 trees. Looking at the lot and the trees that they want to put in, say they're oak trees, there's really only enough space for 1 tree. They would make that point, make that case. Our arborist would then be able to verify the safe and healthy canopy size for that tree is a certain diameter. Then there are 2 other options that this person can comply with. Donating a tree to the village, or making a donation to the tree bank of the village to then have that tree placed somewhere else in the village. The concept is, we're calling it canopy equity, so that everybody's playing a part in trying to preserve, the planet and the village of Royal Palm Beach.
Now, Rob, you mentioned the tree bank. Can you elaborate on that? I heard that tossed around, but I'm not really clear on the tree bank.
Let me defer that to Jennifer
Okay,
with the tree bank and
The tree bank, yeah.
Sure. So one of the new requirements, I wasn't going to go into too much detail on it tonight. There is a new tree replacement schedule. Currently, the village standard is when 1 tree comes out, another tree goes in. It's a 1-to-1 ratio. The problem with that 1-to-1 ratio is over time, say you have an oak tree that has a 30-inch trunk diameter, that tree comes out and the property owner is only required to replace it with 1 tree with a 4-inch trunk diameter. You're not replacing the actual canopy being lost. So in a lot of tree preservation ordinances around the state, they don't have a 1-to-1 ratio. They have more than a 1-to-1 if you have a larger, more mature tree. So if you had a 30-inch diameter trunk for an oak tree, you may have to replace that with 6 trees. What Rob had mentioned earlier is sometimes the size of your lot will not accommodate 6 oak trees. Again, we're trying to make up for the canopy that's being lost.
Okay.
We understand there are size constraints on a lot, so we wanted to provide a property owner with other alternatives to still meet their code requirement, even though they can't accommodate the trees on their property. And one of those other options is the village tree bank. There's a set formula in the code that calculates, okay, an oak tree of this minimum size will cost this much money. And so instead of having to put that tree on the property owner's property, they can pay into the tree bank. They're still providing a tree. It's just a different way of providing the tree. The nice thing about the tree bank is it sets up a fund for the village to start doing streetscape and tree reforestation programs in some of the older neighborhoods that have lost a ton of tree canopy over the years. So the thought process is, as this tree bank accumulates, they'll have funding to go in and plant trees in yards in some of the older neighborhoods. And they'll do it according to a plan, and it will be approved by council. But that money's going to be used for that kind of thing. Again, it's this continual refurbishment of the tree canopy, and that's the thought process behind the ordinance. So I hope that answered your question about what the tree
Yes,
bank
it
is
did,
for.
and I'm piecing it together now.
Yeah, it's not just
Thank
the
you.
village taking the money and using
No,
it for whatever they want. It's for that specific purpose of, going out and buying trees for these neighborhoods.
So that's gonna, let me ask you this then. So if my property could only take 1 tree and I was required to put in 2 or whatever the case might be, but it can only take 1.
Mm-hmm.
Could I fight you on that? Because maybe I don't want to donate to the bank. I mean, I'm only concerned with my property. I'm being a stingy resident right now, because we have stingy residents.
People will fight on everything.
Right.
So, yes.
So that's what I'm saying. If you're telling me that I really need 2 trees on this, but you're looking at it and you say, there's no way that 2 trees are gonna be accommodated on your property. Okay, I'll stick one in there, but I'm not gonna pay for this other one to go anywhere else right there. I mean,
It would probably
what's-
be a code enforcement issue at that point, so the homeowner's gonna have to decide, is it cheaper to pay for the tree or to be in code enforcement? And that's a decision that homeowner's gonna have to make.
But I'm saying, if my property can only accommodate 1 tree, how then is that?
Well, I guess the question we would have to evaluate is, why can your property only accommodate 1 tree? Was it because of personal decisions that you have made in expanding to the maximum level of impervious area on your site? You know, there's a lot of different factors we would take a look at. At the end of the day, it's probably gonna be a magistrate decision on, if we got to that point and we said there was a violation for somebody not fulfilling the tree replacement schedule, the magistrate would make that call.
Right, because I'm thinking about like, some folks who are looking to purchase property here and you already have homeowners who are, dying to sell, and they might have done a whole lot of stuff that code enforcement has not caught up with over the years.
Unfortunately, that happens,
And
yes.
now, yeah, and now you've got this new resident coming in, and now they're gonna be taxed and, trying to figure out how
One-
to get this.
Remember, one of the other options, though, if you don't want to do the tree bank and you can't put it on your property, you can donate a tree.
Okay.
Like actually buy a tree and donate it to village land. So we would put it in Commons Park, or we'd put it in some other public area where everyone can enjoy it. So we tried to give as many options as feasibly possible, where a homeowner's still fulfilling their requirements, but, may not be able to accommodate it on site.
And given our code requirements as far as pervious area requirements, those type of scenarios will be so far and few between. And just going through the examples that I've run across in my mind, I wouldn't see where there would be, if you have a single family home and you met the pervious area requirements, that you couldn't fit 2 trees on your property, front yard and backyard.
Okay.
And one other thing to add to that, so we've been talking about oak trees as kind of an example, and so you're thinking, okay, maybe I can't fit 2 oak trees. You always have the ability, we have in our code that 3 palm trees equal 1 shade. So if you wanted to put like a 3-point Christmas palm in, you can definitely fit that.
Crepe myrtles, they don't have a big footprint.
Right. So there's options available to homeowners, and Bradford and Kevin are always wonderful at working with people trying to find alternative species, to try to fit in the best area, because we know not every tree grows in certain spots, so. Okay,
Well, I had a question, Rob. You probably remember this because this happened to me at my commercial building.
I do.
Remember?
Along the back side of Sparrow?
Yep. I want to make sure we address that in here because there was no remedy for what happened. I had contracted with a custom palm guy, the arborist, to trim all of the black olive trees back on Sparrow behind our building. And I came in Monday morning and was appalled to see they were all hat racked.
Yeah.
I immediately, but the thing that really caught me off guard was it wasn't later than 9 a.m. that code enforcement was in my office demanding that I replace all those trees. These are very old trees, as you know, and I had said that that's just not fair. This was like in 2009.
Quite a ways back.
Yeah, it was quite a way, right after the economy had gone bad. And when I finally looked up the code, it said you're not allowed to do it, but there was no remedy. So I want to make sure this covers the remedy.
the remedy that we had was you could get a fine, and then most likely the magistrate was going to tell you to take them out and replace them. We're putting in a more specific remedy now, where if you were to encounter that situation again, you would have the ability to consult with an arborist or a landscape architect, and that person could tell you, hey, I think I can rehabilitate these trees. I think in a year I can have these back where they're in a healthy condition, and you would then be able to work with code enforcement on that rehabilitation plan. We did not have that before.
No.
Like Rob said, it was kind of all right, let's give it a few months and see if it turns green. We're not sure, and if it doesn't turn green, then you may have to take it out. But this is like a more specific remedy now, and it gives the property owner the ability to rehabilitate it correctly. So that, if a tree is truly hat-racked and it can't be really rehabilitated, the life of that tree is not going to be long.
Absolutely.
So we encourage people to use arborists and landscape architects to make sure if something like that does happen, and there is a chance to rehabilitate, it's rehabilitated properly so that you can, expand the life of that tree.
And I might add, all our trees look beautiful.
They sure do.
Okay, that was my only question, because like I said, it was very vague when they came into my office and demanded that I replace those trees when I was assured that they would grow back within 6 months. And it was right before hurricane season, so, good.
Well, this will formalize that kind of reasonableness that we came up with.
Perfect.
And just one other point on reasonableness, this came out at the council meeting on first reading. Back in the first meeting in November. The new tree replacement schedule, the one I talked about earlier, where we're changing the 1-to-1 ratio to something different based on the size of the tree. Council was concerned that there may be times where there is an act of God that happens, where the homeowner is completely innocent. It wasn't like the homeowner went out with a chainsaw and went to town on the tree. We're talking about hurricane events or lightning strikes, those types of acts of God. And council was concerned that, we didn't want to seem cruel and unreasonable if somebody is trying to recover from a storm event and all of a sudden we're saying, oh, by the way, that tree that fell down in the hurricane, you now have to replace it with 7 trees. That's not the route we want to be. We want to be reasonable. So what council did at the last meeting is they directed us to put into the code 3 exceptions to the new tree replacement schedule. So if one of these 3 things happens, you only have to replace the tree on a 1-to-1 ratio. You don't have to follow the new tree replacement schedule. And the 3 exceptions are if there's a lightning strike, if there's a named storm event for Palm Beach County, so in the event there's a hurricane or a tropical storm that actually receives a name from the National Weather Service, that would count. And then 3, if there was a motor vehicle accident. That happens way more than people realize, where cars, crash into trees. So those 3 things council thought they should be restricted to the 1-to-1 ratio for tree replacement. So that's new in the code as well.
What about tornadoes?
I vote.
They didn't get into that.
I'm saying, what about tornadoes? You're telling me, you're saying a named storm right there, but occasionally we get a little flare up here or there and something just decided to want to drop down on us right there. What about that?
The conversation with council was, we got into events that you could prove occurred.
Sure you
So,
can
sometimes.
prove a tornado.
I have a question. There's also diseases and there's things that trees experience. How is that going to be treated? That's an act
Disease-
of God.
Well, and we got into that, how far are you going to take act of God? Because if a tree becomes diseased, there is a point in time where the homeowner probably could have treated it,
Right.
and they didn't, and so then the tree died. We didn't feel like council didn't want to go that far with it.
Okay.
Okay, so the tree's gonna die. I'm not an arborist, so I don't know anything about taking care of a tree. I mean,
Yeah,
I just look at it and it looks healthy, and next
Yeah.
thing you know, all of a sudden, you got fungus growing all over it. I can just imagine a whole lot of folks right there
Exactly.
are gonna be looking
Well,
like,
if I may, Commissioner Plummer, we're comfortable that the arborist and the professional that we come on board with will be able to look at things at sometimes in a forensic manner and tell us if it was a wind event that broke that tree and caused it to be damaged. And, it may not be formally written into the code, but those are the kind of things that would come in front of the magistrate at that point to be able to use, some reasonability.
okay, gotcha.
Sounds like staff did a great job here.
And just the last thing I wanted to add, Rob already touched on this, but council did add in to the ordinance a 6-month stay period on the tree trimming standards. So if council adopts the ordinance on December 6th, then it will become effective that date, but staff has been directed not to enforce any of the new tree trimming standards for 6 months until June to give community development and the new arborist an opportunity to go out and educate the public about
Very fair.
all of the new standards.
So that doesn't apply to the rest of the ordinance?
No, the rest will
Tree
be,
replacements, all that stuff?
that will all be,
effect immediately.
that's correct. That's correct.
Okay, so can we get a motion to approve ordinance number 945?
I'll make a motion as read.
Second?
Second.
And can we do public comment before we take a vote?
Sorry.
No problem. Does anyone have any public comment they'd like to make? All right, seeing none, we'll close public comment. Thank you.
So I have a comment before we make a
Okay.
motion. So I had, I think you're aware of the concerns I expressed about the horizontal clearance portion of the ordinance, which is, it seemed like it needed to be looked at in more detail. My understanding, based on my conversation with you, is that there is a streetscape program that will be put in place that will address that issue. It's not necessarily currently addressed as it maybe could be.
That's
But
correct.
that it will be put in place as part of the streetscape program, where a more comprehensive look at the streets and the clearances involved in terms of from a safety perspective, where those trees are allowed to be planted and to be maintained. It's a maintenance, I think, is
Yes.
that particular portion of the ordinance. The maintenance,
Mhm.
clear zones, trees is a safety consideration that should be looked at carefully.
Thank you. And go
There's
ahead.
there's a standard in place for that now, with the visibility triangles for any plantings in the right-of-way, clearances at intersections and things like that.
Right, I'm aware of that one. The one I was concerned with is the actual clear zone, the horizontal offset from the edge of the roadway to the tree. There is the ordinance calls for 6 feet across the board and doesn't distinguish between the type of roadway, the speed, the geometry,
I see.
et cetera. And it's something that should be looked at, I think, in more detail.
And we agree, Commissioner. Just to fill everyone in, there is a new section 15-40 in the code that talks about right-of-way clearance, whether it's a horizontal clearance or a vertical clearance. Before, these standards were all in right-of-way utilization permits. They weren't actually in the code. And since we were coming into Chapter 15, we thought, well, this is a good opportunity to actually put them in the code. Again, goes to that uniformity in application. So the way that the ordinance is set out, it sets out minimum standards for the clear zones. So as you're driving down a street or you're walking down a sidewalk, how does that tree need to be maintained so you're not hitting it with your head or hitting it with the top of your car or having it hit your tires? It's those kind of ideas. What Commissioner Schillingford brought up, which is an excellent point, is the code right now, it just sets out minimum standards for right-of-way. It doesn't say whether it's a minor street or a collector street or an arterial roadway. It just says streets. We talked to the village engineer, and I know you were emailing him today. There is another section in 15-40 that talks about streetscape programs. And what it says is if the village council approves a streetscape program for a particular street, the maintenance standards for vegetation along that street are going to be in the streetscape program. So you may have different clear zones based on the streetscape programs. If you don't have a streetscape program, then the minimums in the ordinance are going to apply. It's my understanding from talking to the engineer that council needs to approve the concept of the streetscape program. And then once council approves the concept, the engineering department will go and actually develop the streetscape programs. They have ideas of what that's going to look like for especially some of the larger roadways like Rural Palm Beach Boulevard, but they haven't put that in writing yet because they're waiting for council to approve the concept. But my understanding is, like I said, once council adopts the ordinance, then engineering will start working on those streetscape programs.
Just wanted to make a point that right now the way it's written, that minimum standard that's in the ordinance is a default unless there is a streetscape program in place. And
That's correct.
Streetscape programs are going to be in place, are going to be street specific.
That's
Is
correct.
that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so and there are none in place right now.
That's right.
So essentially, everything defaults to that. So is there a program is there a schedule to get, in other words, it would seem to be reasonable to me that the default would cover all the bases and that it would be something that we could hang our hats on and be comfortable that we're covered. You see what I mean? From the perspective of a tree that's too close to the road that might be a 20-inch diameter tree. You know, my kids I drive around the neighborhood. I don't think there are any issues, but the point is, there are well-established standards that we could simply refer to, and actually in other areas of the ordinance, we do refer to that same that criteria that I mentioned. But for some reason, there seems to be some reluctance to do the same thing for that particular criteria. And it just seems
Well-
like a logical, easy thing to do for that particular section of the ordinance.
The sections that may be in that ordinance now are being put together to try to make it more comprehensive. But planting in the right-of-way is defined through engineering right now. And it adjusts because a uniform standard saying 6 feet will not work in the village. We have swales that are 15, 18, bigger and smaller, and we've got inline drainage running all the way through them. So that's what I'm referring to before, is that the engineering department has a planting standard that talks about the type of species that are allowed to be planted in the right-of-way and distances from that inline drainage and the sidewalk access that I think may be able to address some of your concerns. It sounds like you're leaning towards making something uniform across the village, but the village isn't constructed uniformly.
No, actually, I'm actually not.
Okay, so it's street specific is the key to what you're identifying.
Yes, exactly. That is the standard approach to clear zones on streets. It's dependent on the type of street, the speeds, the volume of traffic, and the roadside development. So it's the way it is right now. And I didn't see, if it is, and I certainly admit I'm not familiar with all of the different ordinances and codes of the village. So if it's addressed elsewhere adequately, but it did seem like an opportunity, and I think I've seen, and I did do some digging around, it is addressed, for example, for utility poles and other types of support structures. But for trees in particular, if we're doing an ordinance about trees, it would seem like that would be a good place to do it. And so that was a concern. But I'm comfortable that, if the intent is that it will be addressed, then that's fine.
And I'll be happy to speak with the village engineer, and he can state this at the council meeting, how quickly they think they're going to get the first streetscape programs up and running. I don't know the answer to that, but it was my understanding your street specific information is going to be in the streetscape programs. So each street will have its own rules.
One other thing that I noticed about the ordinance, the way it was presented, there were, from the meeting that we had, I guess it was July 2017, there were a number, 10 or more recommendations that this board made, and were listed at the end, but there was no documented resolution. Was it implemented?
Sure.
Was it not? So it's just a suggestion that it might be helpful to the board, particularly those that may not have been there at the time.
Absolutely.
How were those addressed?
Yes. Councilmember Hamera had asked that question at the end of the workshop, I think, in October.
And actually, I did see that meeting, and I did see how those were addressed. What I'm suggesting now is that perhaps that could be added, just a brief sentence, just saying, okay, this was revised and incorporated, this was not because of this, or just some status of that recommendation.
I can do that now if that would be helpful.
That's fine.
Okay, absolutely. So let me, okay. So this was from the LPA's recommendations back in July of 2017. They gave 7 recommendations to council. One was to revise the definition of tree abuse as it relates to pruning palm fronds and provide specific examples. Staff did talk about revising that definition, and we thought it would be more helpful in the educational materials that we give to the public to show photos of like do's and don'ts with palms, because a lot of people love to do what we call carrot topping, make it look like a little carrot. But we thought that would be really helpful to have with visuals in educational materials. So we didn't add it into the code, but we're going to address it in another form. The next recommendation was the village should hire an arborist to act as a consultant to the code enforcement department and planning and zoning department. Like I said before, that is being implemented, and we're hoping to have that person on board in January. Review the standards for horizontal clear zones. This was your issue. After your meeting, I did talk to the village engineer, and at the time he said he felt comfortable with the clear zones that were listed in the ordinance. So I didn't change them based on his direction. Number 4 was make a clear statement in the ordinance that the village does not require a permit fee to add landscaping to a site. We didn't feel that was necessary. It says specifically there's a fee to remove landscaping, so we didn't feel that you needed a statement to prove a negative. So we didn't add that. Number 5 was add a provision. This was for the tree replacement schedule, the new not 1-to-1 ratio. Add a provision that larger trees may be substituted for smaller minimum standard tree replacements. So the thought process there was, say you're required to put 2 trees on your lot at a minimum size. So a 14-foot high tree, 5-foot spread canopy, 2 of those. The thought was, we'll let people put in little 2-foot trees to make up the 14 feet.
No, actually, the intent was to allow one larger tree rather than several smaller trees. So that, for example, a homeowner may decide that rather than they may want to actually replace the tree that they lost and the canopy they lost with a larger tree. The ordinance didn't seem to address that option.
Okay.
Where someone may want to put in bigger trees, but fewer larger trees.
Okay, well, thank you. I misunderstood that. I think the staff did talk about the idea of swapping out sizes. From an enforcement perspective, that becomes difficult for staff because there's the minimum standard. And if you start allowing each property to have different specs, whether it be smaller trees or one larger, it becomes very difficult for especially code enforcement to follow up on later, because they may see a large tree, not realize there was an exception. They could have the one large tree instead of the 2, and they cite the homeowner. Then the homeowner has to go explain why they only have 1 tree. So we wanted to keep it consistent and easily enforceable. That was kind of why we didn't want to deviate from the minimum size requirements. Number 6, the village should consider publishing notices in the town crier of upcoming public outreach events for the new landscaping ordinance. Additionally, put the information in the newsletter. The LPA believed that community outreach was key in order to have a successful ordinance. We agree 100%. As Rob stated, they're going to put information in the newsletter. I don't know about town crier ads. We weren't having planned just like public information sessions. It was going to be more targeted to specific groups, like specific property owners that we thought, like HOAs.
HOAs, right.
Right. But we agree public outreach is going to be key on this.
And just to finish up, one of the concerns the council had was that they weren't satisfied with just that we were going to put information out there and expect the job to be done. We are going to make ourselves available and directly contact HOAs and property managers and anyone that we can. And also throughout our courtesy notices, in our daily work, reaching out to everybody that we possibly can. So you're going to see a concerted effort because we recognize the importance of it as well. This is a very sensitive issue.
Yeah.
Important, but sensitive to our residents.
I have a question, and maybe the staff can answer this question. There are 39 municipals in this county, including the county. Can you point similar ordinances? Because I'm getting a feel here that, and I'm missing a lot of as to why. We used to have a volunteer system, and now we're beefing up this ordinance, and we're focusing on it, and code enforcement is active. Can you point out other municipals that?
Sure. So it is very common as municipalities age and they become more built out. There's a transition from a thought process of development
Right.
to preserve.
Okay.
And it's not just in landscaping. It's make our older shopping centers,
Right.
keep them up, make them look nice. We want to maintain property values, preserve home values, preserve commercial centers. So the village is heading there.
rather than derelict problems
Correct.
to deal with. Yeah.
So you try to beef up your codes to focus on that preservation, because your community is going to be successful long-term if property values are maintained. And in all honesty, I've worked in a lot of different cities. Landscaping is key to maintaining property values. Do other cities in Palm Beach County have tree preservation ordinances? Absolutely. Are those cities more stringent than this? Absolutely. I'm the special magistrate for the city of West Palm Beach. I do their code enforcement hearings. They are strict.
They're tough.
They do not joke. They do not mess around. They take tree preservation incredibly seriously. So, on a scale of 1 to 100, where we fall on tree preservation, we're probably at like 25 or 30, in all honesty. So did we take a look at other cities when we were doing this code? Yes. I mean, if you look at some of the sections, we have just wholeheartedly adopted them from other cities. Like our specimen tree list comes directly from the town of Lantana. It's almost identical. We added a few other trees that we thought were important to Royal Palm, like the Royal Palm trees and the Royal Poincianas, but we looked very carefully at what other cities have done and tried to find best practices and not be too aggressive out of the box. So we were trying to be careful with that.
So that's basically what I was alluding to, is education. And I'm glad that you're going to go out there, Rob, and educate I'm in an HOA, and also I'm sure at some point you're going to come to our HOA and other HOAs, because that's like a separate issue. I know you have single family and apartment buildings, but the bottom line the point making here is education. If they'll embrace this concept of preservation rather than this is the final deal, code enforcement, your violations and all that. So just a comment, that's all.
Commissioner Nazis, we would agree. The council's direction is echoed through our manager, is educate our public. And if we can get 1 or 2 trees in everybody's front yard, we'll be successful in maintaining property values for the future.
And then the last recommendation that this board made was the village should consider having an Arbor Day event at Commons Park. I did talk to the village manager about that. Currently what we do, the village donates money to each of our public schools every year for their individual school Arbor Day events. So that's currently what we do. Is there an opportunity to have an event at Commons Park at some point in the future? Yes. Council, we didn't talk a whole lot about that at the council meeting. We just mentioned that that's what we currently do.
I have a suggestion. We have Earth Day, and I know we have the schools involved in cleaning up our community. So maybe there might be a combination theme there. This is your home. Basically, take care of it.
Sure. One thing that was thrown out at the council meeting was our Westfest celebration falls right around Arbor Day.
Exactly.
So if there was a way to maybe incorporate a little Arbor Day celebration into the Westfest event. So that's probably something council will talk about in the future.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions?
I had a question. When the code enforcement goes around and if they notice a tree that's diseased or is bad, do they make an effort to contact the homeowner and tell them that there's a problem with that tree?
At this point, no. In the future, if it was significantly dying or deteriorated, I could see us taking that kind of action. It would have to be pretty obvious. I want to be very careful that we're not.
Tree, but if you see something just from the street that that tree looks.
If I see a tree that's split and it's falling down, we're going to make contact with that person and try to coach them into what's coming and how to address it.
I have trees in my yard. I have several trees, oak trees, and olive trees. But if they started going diseased, I wouldn't have any idea. I haven't fertilized.
Well, if it was something, I don't want to call it minor, but if it was something like lethal yellowing, we probably wouldn't pick up on that. But if it was a lightning strike, and we do that now, all of a sudden your tree is dead or dying, we would let you know. We'd give you a courtesy notice, and so you could start planning ahead. But the consensus on our council is that while we are going to enforce this and we're going to implement that after our education period, it's not to be taken as any kind of a proactive round up. You know, our resources are spread in valuable ways right now, and that we think we can enforce this ordinance through observations that are obvious like that, or actions of the property owners. So we won't be riding around looking and knowing that your property's deficient until you cut a tree, or you come in for an addition or some kind of permit, or there's some kind of action on your behalf that would initiate it. That's the direction I've been receiving. We will help out when we see something as obvious like that in our courtesy notice form, but we won't be riding through neighborhoods counting trees. You know, this is a resident-driven kind of ordinance.
Question on that. Are we making any usage of the, our television broadcast when it comes down to actually putting a presentation on, and you could just leave it running, or?
I know that the workshop from October is on the website. I'm sure in the public outreach efforts, we'll be doing links to those kind of things. And Rob's going to be working with his team to do more educational pushes, whether that's videos or slideshows or however that's going to be. But yeah, the presentation is online right now. We haven't really started the push to the public yet because the ordinance isn't adopted at the moment. But
that is another resource that we would use, Commissioner. Just as the marquee signs, we'll let people know that it's coming, or we'll try to direct them to our website. We're going to create FAQs for our website. But mainly, we want to be the boots on the ground kind of people to reach out to those homeowners associations, residents, and property managers.
Yeah.
One thing that might be a good inclusion in the educational thing is regarding some of the comments about disease trees, is actually including education of, what a disease tree looks like, so that residents can actually address it proactively rather than waiting till it dies because they have no idea that it's diseased.
Right.
As we go to educate ourselves, we are going to, and that's why we're going to get this professional on board, and he's going to help us really come up with some ways to simplify this and educate our public.
Yeah,
I agree, Commissioner.
As a simple suggestion, since we broadcast that arborist that you bring on board, maybe they can themselves put something together that can be transmitted over and over. Occasionally I run across the channel when I'm flicking, and it's like, oh wow, yeah.
You don't want to just watch that at 8 o'clock at night?
No, so that's what I'm saying. Occasionally, I accidentally run across channel 19 or whatever right then. It's like, oh, they have something besides the job looping in there, so.
Even know the channel number.
I even know the channel number. That's bad. But
And we do have a communications expert that has been working on certain things with the village. And we do see this arborist that is coming on board to be working in concert with that communications expert to evaluate all avenues that we may have, like you just brought up the TV. We got the newsletter. We've got the reverse 911. I don't know if they'll use that or not, but that's an example of how we reach our residents. So he'll evaluate that, work in concert with this individual that's going to be coming on board, and we're going to try to reach as many people as we can.
Because as a resident, I wouldn't want someone coming in saying, "Well, I had no idea." Well, you're going to get those folks anyway.
We are going to try our best.
Yeah, so you'll get all of those folks right there.
That's the other thing I hear every day.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Right.
Yeah, after 6 months. I didn't know that, but, they're suggesting to just put it out there that way from every angle we're covered in terms of television, newspaper, signage, or whatever the case might be.
And we know as staff and council knows, we cannot possibly anticipate every scenario.
Right.
So we're going to have to be flexible. If we find that there are situations that arise where we're like, you know what, we need an exception for that. That's a good case. We're going to address it. We're not going to, be too heavy-handed with this. We understand this is a work in progress. This is new for everybody.
Okay, we had a motion to approve ordinance number 945. I don't believe we had a second.
We did. It was Commissioner Plummer.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries 5-0. And I say we are adjourned for the evening.